Oh, welcome back. What we got going on here is chapter 7, The Devil. All right. This is something where we're still thinking about Canterbury Tales. We're still thinking about those exploded moments. When does the author take the time to take a moment and blow it up and slow it down and give us the details that matter, right? Are there any connections between the devil? I can see it even without reading the page first. I see the devil here and I see the devil here, right? What's going to be important as we read along? Well, we're going to think about exploded moments on this page. And then we also got Roger Mustard's cow, Molly. I'm running. Why would anybody ever name their someone Roger Mustard? Though I like the name, but I'm just wondering why. So let's get into it. Please drag the important idea today, please. If the world were sweet and fair, Alice, she must be called Alice now, and Will would become friends, and the village applaud her for her bravery, and the midwife be more generous with her cheese and onions. Since this is not so, and the world is just as it is and no more, nothing changed. Most of the villagers still paid no attention to Alice at all. Some were mean. Some, like Gromit Smith, near as big as a dozen Alices, who would sit on top of the girl so Jack and Watt could rub chicken manure into her hair, or the miller, who pinched her rump when she brought grain to the mill to be ground, and some were kind, or nearly so, like the baker's wife, who always asked Alice how she fared on this fine day, and the red-headed Will, who threw fewer stones at her since her saving of him, and sometimes stopped the taunting altogether, saying, "Ah, this wag grows boresome. Dick's granny's hanging out of the wash. Let's go tie knots in his breeches." And that is the way it was until the day the devil walked him out. It started with the two-headed calf born to Roger Mustard's cow, Molly. And then a magpie landed on the miller's barn and would not be chased away. Suddenly the whole village saw witches and devils everywhere, and fear lived in every cottage. Alice, who had slept alone outside in the dark for most of her years, even at fearful time like All Hallows Eve, oh, speaking of, and Walpurgis night, and had never seen the devil and had nothing to fear from the night. It was she then who was sent to fetch and carry and deliver messages after dark, while the villagers stayed in their smoky cottages. So it was that she saw much of what went on in the village and how people lived their lives and spent their time. It was so quiet for a few days with all the villagers inside and idle that Alice even had a little time to herself, to wander and think and plan, to watch and learn from old Gilbert Greyhead about the carving and polishing of wood, and to ask questions of the priest about sin and evil and the devil, humming to herself all the while. Then, one damp autumn morning, Robert Weaver found strange footprints, which wound about the village and stopped suddenly at the door of the church. He called Thomas at the bridge, who knew the ways of the woods and tracks of the animals, to help him discover what sort of beast had been prowling about while they slept. "Were it a weasel, Thomas?" "No, that is a hoof. A weasel has toes." "A goat, Thomas?" "No, those prints are too big for a goat." "A pig?" "No, pig has de claws like that." "A boar, Thomas?" "With that delicate arch, never a boar, Robert." "What then, Thomas? What has hooves as larger than a goat and more delicate than a boar, and walks our village by night, but stops outside the door of the church?" By dinner time, all the village was talking about the strange animal that even Thomas at the bridge could not identify. It only took a few incautious words and fearful whispers to convince them that the devil had found their village and was looking for souls to lead into sin. The next day, the strange, delicate hoofprints were found walking around Dick's granny's cottage, and through the barley field, Robert and Thomas and the priest, whispering paternosters, followed the prints all the way to the mill, where, crossing themselves, they unlatched the door. The startled miller looked up, caught in the act of putting some of Dick's granny's grain into his own sacks. "The devil has indeed been here," cried the priest, "and he has tempted our miller into theft. But let us deal with this thief mercifully, for which of us could withstand the devil?" The villagers agreed, and so the miller, who had listened to the devil, did not have his hands chopped off, but only stood one day in the rain with his millstone tied about his neck. The next day all was quiet, and it was hoped that the devil had moved on to tempt another village. But as the day passed into evening, Kate, the weaver's daughter, ran to the priest with her tale of seeing the devil's prints leading to Walter Smith's barn. The priest and a brave band of villagers, armed with rakes and pitchforks and sticks tied into crosses, hurried to the barn. The priest sprinkled the door with holy water and threw it open. There, cuddled in the haymow, were Gromit, the smith's lardy daughter, and the pock-marked pig boy from the manor. The boy gathered his breeches and flung himself out the bar window. Gromit, being larger, moved more slowly and was caught. Oh no. For listening to the devil, Gromit was made to spend the night in prayer and fasting. She wept, though for loss of pride or loss of supper, none could say. As the villagers sat down to their dinners the next day, Wat, with the runny nose, hurried down the road calling, "I've seen him! A hairy demon with horns and claws and a great thrashing tail. He's on the road to the manor, looking for souls to take to heck." Fully half the villagers ran away from the manor road, but the other half ran toward it, making sure the priest and holy water preceded them. There was no sign of the devil on the manor road or in the woods on either side, and finally the villagers started home, and there near Roger Mustard's cottage were the devil's prints, marching down the road, past Dick's granny's cottage, around Walter Smith's barn, and up to the door of William the Reeve's cottage. Again the villagers flung open the door and again found no devil, and found that the devil had been at work, for there was Wat, finishing off William Reeve's leg of mutton dinner. The priest decided that Wat's gluttony and deceit were the fault of the devil and not of the boy, so Wat's face was not branded, but William Reeve's bad-tempered pigs were in his care from that day on. The next morning it was a large group of villagers who followed the hoofprints to the woods, where the broken-toothed Jack and his friends were clearing brush from Roger Mustard's field. Likely the devil had tricked the boys into laziness, for they found asleep and given a sound beating. 2 days went by with no sign of the devil. The villagers grew calmer, thinking themselves fortunate not to have been tempted by the devil and then found out in so public a fashion. Then, on a misty morning, the devil walked the village again. By this time, no one expected to catch him, but they were eager to see whom they would find in what sin, so all the village followed the prince, except for the midwife, who was called to the manor at the last minute, and Alice, who was elsewhere. The parade of villagers laughed and gossiped out of the village and along the Old North Road, and as they followed the prince through a field, they grew quiet. The prince stopped near a large tree, and so did the villagers. From behind the tree came the call, "Is that you, Jane, my dove?" And out leaped the baker, holding a bunch of Michaelmas daisies and a basket of bread before him. All was quiet. The baker's wife stepped forward and took the flowers as the villagers turned and walked away, leaving her to sort out what was the devil's work and what the baker's. After the departing villagers passed the river at a spot where the water ran swift and deep. Alice stepped out of the woods, and she took something from under her skirt and threw it into the river, and followed the crowd home. And so it was that all except the fortunate midwife, who had taunted or tormented Alice, were punished for their secret sins. After this, the devil was never seen in the village again, and no one but Alice knew why. Several days later, in a village where the river meets the sea, there washed up on the banks 2 blocks of wood carved in the shape of the hooves of some unknown beast. No one could figure out what they were or where they'd come from, so eventually Annie Broadbeam threw them into her cooking fire and enjoyed a hot rabbit stew on a cool autumn night.